Welcome back to the Discover podcast, where we view faith as a discovery journey with Jesus to help you become the person God created you to be. Hey there, Meadowbrook Church. In this episode, we are going to be talking with our youth director, Montie Klecker, as he tells the story of different challenging moments in his life and how God used those challenging moments to help further along his faith. Hope you enjoy this episode. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Discover podcast. On this episode, we have Montie Klecker, who is the youth director here at Meadowbrook Church. We are super excited to get to spend some time knowing his story and learning what God is up to in his life. And so I've known Montie now for almost 6 months, and it's been a joy and a delight to get to know him. And so our hope is that you will enjoy this behind-the-scenes look at his life. So Montie, why don't you just go ahead and tell us a little bit about your upbringing. We know that you're from Kansas.
From
as
Kansas.
I, too, lived in Kansas for a while
Wichita,
when I was younger.
right?
Wichita.
Yeah.
Yep, go Wichita. Go
it's
Shockers.
A nicer spot.
Yep.
Yeah.
So just tell us a little bit about your upbringing, specifically as it pertains to faith, because I know that you grew up in a family where faith was a part of your home life.
Yeah. So I think the easiest way to describe my faith growing up was that we were Christians because we were Republican.
Oh,
And
okay.
so really connected to a lot of the politics there. Like names that don't mean anything in Wisconsin, but in Kansas were like Pat Roberts and stuff like that. My family was super close with. Mm-hmm. And so, a lot of my childhood was surrounding that. And then we were also very fundamentalist. Mm-hmm. And so, everything that could matter except for Jesus mattered.
Sure, you put the fun in fundamental, huh?
Something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, so tell us a little bit about just kind of what that looked like, kind of on a practical level within the rhythm of your home life.
Yeah. Okay. So I was extremely homeschooled.
Okay.
And so I remember very specifically, we went to like one event where it was a guy talking about the science of the banana and how it is the greatest proof. And I wish I was making this up. The greatest proof for God's creation was the Cavendish, which is a type of banana that is so heavily genetically modified that none of it is normal. And he was saying, because it fits in your hand.
Yeah.
I recently found a video that was, I don't think it's the same guy, but another guy with Kirk Cameron talking about the same thing. And it was like, oh, okay.
So bananas are proof of God's existence.
Yeah.
And God's good creation.
Because it fits so well in your hand.
That's funny.
And so stuff like that. A lot of things. Another one that stuck out was like the proof of Jonah and the well and how like we have to make sure we know it's actually a fish. Mm-hmm. And it's all about the fish. And so like I latched on to the Bible Project because they said it's not about the fish.
Right.
And like that type of stuff.
Yeah, it'd be more about what God is doing in and through Jonah and what this story means for us in terms of how we respond to God's activity in our life.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, I think that pretty well explains like that side of things. And then the church I went to was kind of Nazarene.
Okay.
Trying to leave the Nazarene movement, but they were Nazarene, and like the actual building is still a Nazarene church. None of the original staff work there anymore. But I have some really specific memories about how like they, in my opinion, misuse spirituality. And I think I've shared this story briefly with you, but like there was a day that the lead pastor was going corner to corner saying, oh, there's going to be an evil presence here today. And then a young man with autism came into one of the services, and they tried to excommunicate the demons.
Yeah.
That's not the word for it, but
Exercise
the demons.
Yeah.
And this guy with autism was just like freaking out because he's getting yelled at by everyone. And so, those types of stories I've got plenty of.
Yeah. And so for you to have had that experience, it probably significantly shaped at least that initial chapter of your faith journey. I know that in our conversations and getting to know you, you've kind of moved away from that. But tell us kind of about how that move happened.
Yeah. Okay, so my mom started working at that church. And so I think she started working there when I was like 10. And after a while, it became pretty obvious that wasn't a healthy church. And so she had been on staff for about 2 years. And then went to the elders and let them know about the misuse of money and several other things. But the pastor had been using the church's finances as his own personal finances. The elders didn't like that my mom was talking trash on them, and my family was kicked out of the church. Yeah, when I was 12 years old. And so that led to a lot of, I don't know what I think about the church. I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. And being homeschooled, and I wasn't a part of any homeschool groups or anything like that. My entire friend group were the people I went to church with. And so when we left that church, I left like everyone I knew.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did that then impact kind of your family's faith journey and your own faith journey? Because how old were you when that happened?
Yeah, I was 12 when that happened.
Yeah.
I would say that I'm the only one that's active in my faith now. When I was in high school, my mom was really wanting to make sure that we kept going to church because, that's what we do. And I did not get really well connected with anyone there. And like I have some very vivid memories of like getting there on Sunday mornings, and my parents would go to something, and so I would go sit in the service, and I would always sit in the back because I was very awkward and like away from everyone. And there were 2 rows at the front that all the students would usually sit in, and I didn't know any of them, and so I wouldn't sit with them. And
This is at like the new church you guys started going to after you left, right?
Yeah. And man, I just remember like feeling so many levels of loneliness when I was there. I was trying to get plugged into the youth group, but being an awkward guy that no one knew, it was really kind of tough. And an intense season of loneliness. And I don't know how much you want me to get into that, but I can get into that. So since then, I've been diagnosed, and I don't think it really applies as much now that I'm 26 as it did when I was 12.
Yeah.
But I've been diagnosed with dysthymia, which is an outdated term, but basically means long-term clinical depression. If I'd known that when I was younger, holy cow, that would have changed so much, because that would have explained so many of the thoughts I always had growing up. But this season of loneliness got to some pretty intense levels, and I have a very vivid memory of one night where I did not want to wake up the next morning.
Yeah.
And I attempted to take my own life, and I woke up the next morning, and I remember seeing the tear stains on my feeling the tear stains on my face, and like there was such a heavy feeling of regret that it didn't work. And yeah, that was a really terrible week. I don't remember what day that happened, but I do remember like the following Sunday, I got to church thinking that was going to be the exact same as it had been. I'm at that kind of low state, and I go to my usual spot in the church, and a guy named Manuel, he's my age, went and sat next to me.
Yeah.
And he had no clue what was going on in my life, but he came and sat next to me. And I didn't know what to think of that. The next week he sat next to me again, and he kept on doing that until he pulled me up to go sit with everyone else. And, as a 12-year-old who was struggling to make any kind of friendships, that was life-changing.
Yeah.
And he introduced me to, my dearest friends in the world. I've gotten to be a part of 2 of their wedding parties. The rest of the guys are unmarried. But it was very just life-changing for me. I suddenly got community where I had no sense of community.
Yeah. How long had you been going to that church before Manuel reached out to you in that way?
Oh, that's a good question. Maybe a few months.
Okay.
Definitely not into the years, but
sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing all that. I mean, that's weighty, that's heavy. I think it goes to show how, one, you just never know what people's experiences are. 2, you never know just quite how church hurt or church experiences can shape people's perception of the faith and of their walk with Jesus and who God is. And so having heard that from you before, I think it's pretty remarkable that that somehow in the midst of that, like God kept you in his care and kept you close in a way that you were able to keep moving towards him as well and carry on in your faith journey and not abandon it. I mean, that's enough to make anybody say, forget this. Like, I'm not going to follow this God or believe this anymore. I'm going to go do my own thing. So
Yeah, it's kind of become an ongoing joke in the youth group that community is my favorite word.
Yeah.
And this is one of many reasons why it's my favorite word, because legitimately, like, when I had no faith, I think it's Henry Nouwen quotes AA all the time of, I get drunk, we stay sober. And for me, I had no faith, but I was in a faith community that, like, gave me that, I don't know, faith when I didn't have any.
It reminds me of that story in, I think it's Luke 5, where Jesus is teaching in a home, and there is a paralytic who gets like lowered down through a hole that these guys dug in the roof, and he's hanging in front of Jesus. And the text says that Jesus looked at their faith.
Yeah.
You know, so at the very least, it's the faith of this guy, including the friends who are up above, or it could even be he looked at their faith and then healed this man. And so there's something to be said about a community of faith and how the faith that we have somehow has the ability to impact and nurture other people, which I think is really powerful and really significant. Yeah. So you make that change, you make that turn, you go to a different church, you get pulled in after having a really low moment in your life. And just tell us about what then your experience was growing in your faith, because I know that you definitely grew in your faith from there to bring you to where you are today.
Yeah. So I was always heavily involved in the youth group, but more because I had nothing else to do with my time. And so I remember that there was one specific event that was pretty game-changing in my faith, where I'd been going to the youth group for a while. This plays into the story, but I had a bit of a falling out with a friend, and like, wanted nothing to do with them. And so we went to a conference called CIY, and of course that person was on that trip, and I did my absolute best to stay away from them as much as possible. And like, I would have called myself a Christian at that point, but it was all just, I was acting, you know, I was going through the motions, but relationship with Jesus was non-existent. And on what they call cry night, because, you know, they build the emotions all week up until this night. I remember I got into an argument in my head. Someone described this to me as my soul was talking to God's soul. And
you're arguing with God, essentially.
Yeah, I was arguing with God, because I felt it so heavily laid on me that I needed to go talk to the person that hurt me. And it was like, there's no way I'm going to talk to them. And like, I don't know how much of it was the week was convincing me that, oh, yeah, it's God that I'm talking to, because it was a spiritual week. But I got into that argument, and it was like, there is no way I'm going to talk to that person. If you want this conversation to happen, then they're going to have to start the conversation.
Yeah. Was that an argument that was going on throughout the week, or was it just in that one evening?
It was in that one evening. And it's hard to explain how real of a conversation it really was. Like, because it's hard to explain it, but it is so vivid in my memory of like, there is no way that this didn't happen. And so I got into that argument, told God that I'm not starting the conversation.
You told God no.
Yeah.
So what did he do in response?
Yeah. We left the conference for the night to go into small group discussions, and that person was walking in front of me. I was trying to avoid them, especially now with that. And they just stop, turn around, and say, "Montie, I'm sorry I've been so cruel to you." And then they kept on walking. And I remember just my stomach sank, because it was like, dang it, now I'm going to have to actually do something. God followed on his side. Yeah. And so I pulled a friend to the side and was like, this is what happened. What do I do? And they were saying, sounds like you need to go talk to them. And so we had a conversation, and I wish I could say that we were like good after that. Honestly, like, even now, they're not someone that I want in my life. Yeah. But but we had that conversation, and I went back to my youth pastor after that and told him, I think God's calling me to something.
Yeah.
And I have no clue what it is. And like immediately he was like, okay, we're going to use that. And started having me teach the middle school class. I don't think I was quite a senior in high school, but it was around that time.
Yeah.
He started having me teach a Sunday school class, and we had one event that we were going to a church in a small town nearby, and he asked me to give my testimony, and that was the first time that I really spoke in front of anyone. And like he was just giving me every opportunity he could to see what it was that I wanted to do with my life. And one story that I've shared with a few students where it was like it was a failure to some degree, but he asked me to go speak at his school function, and so I went to go speak at the school function, and he had an asthma attack that morning. And so wasn't able to make it, but he also wasn't able to tell me he had an asthma attack.
Oh.
And so like I went up there, and my opening joke for this school function was middle schoolers was, hey, you know those Marvel movies? I've seen those.
Yeah.
I thought I was funny.
That was your joke?
That was my opening joke. Yeah.
I've seen those.
Yeah. I'd like to say I'm funnier now than I was then.
A little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. So it's funny. It's not funny, but interesting to me when you talk about your conversation with God that night, and it reminds me of Jacob wrestling with God, right? You're not actually physically wrestling, but a mental wrestle with God inviting you into something, and then you saying no, and God inviting you into something, to the point where God's like, okay, I'm just going to do this anyway, and almost not necessarily force your hand, but really put you in a situation of like, how do you think about what God's doing in your life? And sometimes God makes it so obvious, this is what I want you to do, this is what I'm asking of you, and then how are you going to respond?
Yeah. I love this concept of faith after doubt, where it's like, I grew up in a situation where doubt was not acceptable. Doubt means you don't have faith. Yeah. And so you tuck it in the corner, and unfortunately when it's in the corner, it festers. Yeah. And like it was through conversations with my youth minister, especially in that season where it became no, doubts are something that you need to wrestle with. Yeah. And then it's also like you're wrestling with concepts of God that you were raised on, and those aren't always accurate. Yeah. And so, faith after doubt's a big thing with me, and wrestling with those things.
Yeah. Sometimes we put faith and doubt as though they are like against each other, as though like doubt is the opposite of faith. Yeah. But I would say really what we see in Scripture, it's that like what God invites us into is a moving away from control, right? Yeah. Like control that is motivated by fear is what I would say is the opposite of faith. And so it's almost as though doubt is along the spectrum of faith, where like fear and control are the things that are opposed to faith. And God can handle our doubts. He can handle our questions. Absolutely. And so the invitation is to bring them to him, because he can work with that. Yeah. I
think it's Brene Brown who talks about how like doubt's not the opposite of faith. Certainty is. Yeah. Because when we're certain in something, we don't need to have faith in it.
Right. Yeah. So you go through this season of high school where, you have some relational difficulty, you see some movement of God in your life that's propelling you into ministry opportunities. You graduate high school, and then where do you go next?
Yeah. Okay, so I graduated high school and knew that I wanted to be involved in the church, but had no idea what that meant. I'd been working at a movie rental store called Hastings, and from conversations I've had here, apparently it never made it up north. Yeah. But it was awesome. It was like Hot Topic meets Barnes & Noble meets like Blockbuster. I loved it. Yeah. And so like I'd been working there for a year, and they closed shortly after I graduated, and it left me in this spot of I have no clue what I want to do. Got a job at a Little Caesars kind of as filler, and really just got complacent with my life, and it was I was going through the motions again. I was helping out with the youth group every chance I got, but that was what my church life was. Yeah. I really wasn't engaging in any kind of ministry outside of what I was asked to do. And that was something I had done for a while until a friend that Manuel introduced me to when he pulled me into that group, a friend named Zach, came up to me and said, hey, so I'm in the process of going to Manhattan Christian College, Manhattan, Kansas.
Not Manhattan, New York.
Not Manhattan, New York. That never comes up when I say Manhattan Christian College. And I need a roommate. I know that ministry has been heavy on your heart. I think that you should go there. And so I applied and got in and started going to Manhattan Christian College and like met my mentor there and some of my best friends there and like found this passion for understanding scripture in a way that I didn't know I could understand it. And it's like, there's so many nuances that I can dig into and really just fall in love with scripture, and falling in love with scripture really made me fall in love with Christ in a way that I hadn't experienced before. And I don't know, that was a really amazing experience. So I went there for from 2017 to 2020. Yeah. And 2020 was fun.
A big year.
Yeah, it was a big year.
Yeah. So you would have finished college. You were one of the lucky ones to finish college in the beginning of the pandemic. And so how did that shape those last few months of school for you? What happened?
Yeah, we shifted to online during that time. And honestly, those were pretty uneventful. I made a few fun videos with some friends, and that was like the only thing that really changed. But my home church reached out to me and said, hey, we need someone to get us set up online.
Would this have been the same church you went to after you left the first church and Manuel met you in that church? That was a church you went back to? That was the
church, okay. Yeah. So they asked me to go back, and I went back and got them up and online. And I really enjoy doing AV work. But I would not say that it's the same kind of passion as other ministries. Like it's not youth ministry for me.
Yeah. So you go back home from college. The church gives you an opportunity to work at the church.
Yeah.
However, it's not in the area of ministry that you necessarily feel a deep calling and or passion to. So how did those years go, and what did God do in your life to essentially bring you to where you are today?
Yeah. So my undergraduate degree is in youth ministry, but I've always had an interest for AV. And so my passion was not what I was pursuing, but my interests were. And so was doing that while I got back. And when I got back, I always feel like I'm like a 14-year-old on TikTok when I talk about this. But I got into a situationship.
Okay.
I hate that word so much.
So for those who are like a little bit older than me, I actually had to look up that term at one point in time. What is a situationship?
You're not in a relationship, but both of you approach it like you want to be.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, I might get a lot of criticism from the teens for saying it that way too. Yeah. But got into a situationship, and like I was all in. And from what she had communicated to me, she was as well. And it ended up ending in a like using God to end it. And
it's not me, it's not you, it's actually God. That's why we're breaking up.
God said that.
Yeah.
Very audibly to her. And it's always crazy, like whenever it's the, God told me to start dating you, or God told me to stop dating you, it's only communicated to one person.
Right.
That feels very biblical.
Right.
But that left me kind of in a devastated spot. Like I had poured so much emotional energy into this person, and like it was almost daily. It was daily. We were texting all the time. And so I was a bit devastated after that, and one of my best friends in the world came over and just mourned with me for a little bit and basically said, so what are you going to do with those emotions now? Mm-hmm. And so
sometimes people think like we should shut off our emotions at that moment. Just like, I'm not doing that again. I'm just going to turn them off and be a stoic person for the rest of my life.
Yeah. I'm glad that isn't what happened, but I definitely remember having those thoughts in that time. So in that conversation with him, we kind of came to a spot where it was like, what would it look like for you to pour that same emotional energy towards God? Mm-hmm. And like, I had never thought about that, like getting into those same, like, I was texting with her all the time. What if that was actually my prayer life, What if the same amount of emotional energy that I was putting towards this situationship was what I was putting into God? And that ultimately resulted in me applying for Duke Divinity School. and like this was 4 years ago. Like I'm almost done with that.
Yeah.
And I feel like a completely different person now with all of that.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. So I wish it didn't have to have happened that way, but
Yeah.
I am glad that it happened. It's
Yeah.
brought me to where I am.
Yeah, so you didn't move to Duke, though, because
No.
the program you were at was an online program.
Yeah, I did not know this when I applied, but that was actually the first cohort. I'm in the first cohort that they've
Yeah.
ever opened to this hybrid model. And so, yeah, 1 week a semester is on campus. The rest of it's
Yep.
online.
So you-
sales pitch.
Yeah. So you started that, though, while at your former church, working there, going to school, and why not
Yeah.
just stay there, keep doing what you were doing, finish out your degree? What was going on that led you to say, like, hey, in the middle of seminary, I should go find another job?
Yeah. I got to a spot where I was 8 years into Bible school, and I was just really ready to be using my education. And I love my home church. Like the people there have poured so much into me, but Jesus wasn't accepted in Nazareth, and I'm no Jesus. But
Yeah.
I really found myself distancing from a lot of what I was allowed to do there, and found myself just really needing to get into a position that I could actually follow my passion of like youth ministry and
Yeah.
start pouring into people and using my almost 8 years of education.
Yeah.
And so through some tough conversations, I ended up leaving my job and applying for some churches. And I found Meadowbrook on churchstaffing.com.
Yep.
.org, whatever it is.
Yep.
And this was one of two churches that I really got invested in.
Yeah.
And through the interview process, I thought this was really funny. We had one interview where it was you and a few others on the call, and like I got off the call, started texting with my mentor because I felt like it went poor.
Yeah.
Like I did not know what to think about it, and then I got a text from you saying, "Hey, can we set up another interview tomorrow to talk through doctrine?" And we got onto that call, and I'm expecting that I'm gonna be like the wrong guy entirely for y'all, and we started talking, and it's like, oh no, we're almost identical in these areas, and that was really exciting to me because I'm not identical with my home, and like the excitement about a church that is engaged in theology was just so cool.
You've been a great fit. You've been, an easy addition to our staff. You fit right in. It feels like you've been here for years, and you've been here, not even 6 months. Like it's been, 3 months maybe?
3 months, August 1st.
Yeah, it feels a whole lot longer.
When this comes out, 5.
Yeah. So one of the things that we're really interested in with this season of our podcast is trying to hear stories from people of what God is doing in their life real time. It's wildly important to look back on your story and see where God has brought you and how he has been faithful in the different seasons and the different chapters and the different moments. But it's equally important for us to be paying attention to and responding in real time to what God is doing in our life right now. So as you think of like just recent months and maybe even recent days of as you've made this transition, no small transition to like move from your hometown to another state, a place that's wildly different than Kansas, still in the midst of, your education and your degree, starting a new job, like all those things are big transitions. So what have you been seeing God doing in your life in the midst of this transition?
Yeah. Well, okay. Like we've been talking about those Kairos moments, those God moments where it's like you just see God so vividly.
Yeah.
And it was so funny to me during my interview weekend. Like I'm still not sure quite how everything's going to go here. And the first people I meet are Dennis and Sue Bailey. And we started having some conversations, and like theology matters a lot to me, and like being able to have deep theological conversations. And one of the first things that they say is, I'm sure you haven't heard of this theologian, but we love his podcast. And they started talking about a podcast that I've been obsessed with for a while.
Yeah.
And like Michael Heiser's the theologian, and like he's not like a household name. He's not N.T. Wright.
Right.
But
Nobody is.
Yeah. But it was so cool, like hearing this guy that I didn't know people knew outside of me talked about like he's a household name. And then like it was such a cool weekend, and I found out through conversations that apparently not one but two Raising Cane's were getting put here. And it's like, man, that is what I needed to move here.
The Lord works in mysterious ways,
Yeah.
right? Through niche theologians and
The best chicken in the world.
the second best chicken in the world.
Okay, Dave's is good. I would not say it's the best.
Stop it.
But that ended up turning into like one of the quickest months in the world. Quickest but slowest. I was taking Hebrew
Yeah.
at the time.
Oof.
Hebrew is tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad I took it. I'm glad it's
Yeah.
done. But
What do you think the Lord is teaching you in regards to just who He is and who you are? Like now that you're like in the thick of all of the relationships and interactions with students, with our church, like what are
Yeah.
the things that He's been showing you and teaching you since getting here?
I have found myself really thriving on and needing to develop a better theology of the Imago Dei. And there have been so many conversations with students where it's been like with adults even, where it's like the situation works way better when you look at it from the other person's perspective as well, which students are notoriously good at doing. And like that's been one of the cool things that I've been working on in my own faith of like what does it mean? The word sonder has been what I've been using a lot for that, which is everyone's living just as vivid of a life as you are.
Yeah.
And the students can tell you that pretty easily now.
That you use the word sonder a lot.
I do. Yeah.
And they now know what it means.
They do.
Yeah.
They do. And like that's been a really cool thing. And then like it is hard to explain just all of the ways that I feel like I belong here. But I'm here. It's been almost 4 months, and it's been kind of cool. On the interviews, I was told that this is a church that is meant for hurt people. Like if you have church hurt, this is the place you go.
Yeah, we talk about a church being a hospital and a home.
Yeah.
A place where broken people can belong. Yeah.
And I've gotten to see that, and like I've gotten to work through some of my own church hurt and some of my own childhood traumas and those things while being here. And like it's been really incredible being in a place where not only is that safe to do, but it's encouraged to like become who God has made me to be. And like it's hard to nail down specific moments, but that has been such a consistent thing through conversations with you, Jackie, Nate, like everyone here. And it's like, no, these are the people you can talk to. Talk to us. We want to be talked to. And it's like, I don't know if I've ever experienced that kind of health, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
And yeah. It's been really exciting to be here.
Yeah. Well, we believe in you deeply. I mean, we think that God has you here for such a time as this. We believe that you are the right person. We believe that your story matters. We have confidence that God is continuing to shape your story in the here and now in real time. And we look forward to seeing where it's going to go in the years to come as you continue to grow and develop and lead the students of our church and shape that ministry. And so this has been a great conversation for me. Some of this I've heard before just in our ongoing conversation. Some of it's been new. And we're just really grateful for you. And so this is an invitation to all of you, like just to spend some time. For those of you who don't have students in the youth ministry, you hopefully are seeing this, hearing this, and it inspires you to come connect with Montie on a Sunday, ask him some questions, take him out to coffee, talk theology, take him to Raising Cane's. He will love you forever if you do that. So thanks for taking the time. And really, I should say thank you for like setting all this up. I mean, a big part of the reason why we're doing this is because of all the behind the scenes work that Montie is doing. All of his AV production work and background is really supporting this. And so thanks for that in a big way.
Absolutely.
And so, hey, Meadowbrook Church, hopefully this has been an encouraging conversation for you, and we look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Have a great rest of the week.